Good evening and welcome to Live United, a show where we talk about how we're living, working, and playing together in the Monadnock region to make lives better for everybody. My name is Nikki Sauber from Monadnock United Way, and I'm pleased to have on our show this evening Leif Seligman from Monadnock Restorative Community.
Hi, Nikki.
Welcome, Leif. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Wow, so Monadnock Restorative Community is a pretty new organization in our area.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say too much more. You can explain what it is. Tell us all about it.
Okay, it started we're about a year and a half old as an organization, so quite new. And it began with the idea that women coming out of jail need a lot of support. And obviously we're in the midst of a horrible crisis around opioid addiction and heroin, and lots of folks who are incarcerated related to that crisis. And so we're really just trying to do a couple of things. We're trying to provide support for, as I said, women coming out of jail. And it isn't that men coming out of jail don't need support, so I want to say at some point we hope to expand our services. But we decided to start with females for a couple of reasons. One, there's some different needs. And also because more often than not, the women tend to be moms, and mothers tend more often than not to be the primary caregivers for kids. So if we can help women stay out of jail, get a solid footing in recovery, we're also having a positive impact on their children and the next generation. So that's why we focused originally on women. And so the two pieces of our work are, one, to provide some support for women as they're transitioning back. And hopefully, if we can provide support for women who are maybe struggling or really working towards recovery, maybe we can prevent some folks from being incarcerated in the first place. Because the best way to stop recidivism is to stop going to jail, period. So, and then the other piece of our organization, our other sort of piece of our vision, is that the folks in the community, it's really hard to reintegrate into a community if you're not welcomed. And I believe that this is a wonderful area. We all love living here. And I believe people want to be really welcoming and inclusive, but sometimes people just aren't sure how. What's the best way to do it? So part of our work as an organization is to have conversations exactly like this one and out in the community with folks to shift the paradigm. So right now people might say, gee, how can I as an individual be supportive to help women who are overcoming the obstacles of reentry? And I would like to shift the question so that members of the community say, hey, how can we as members of the community dismantle the obstacles that we have placed there unintentionally? So that it isn't, oh, that woman's problem, she should overcome this. But, hey, we as a community have created some obstacles and we could think differently so that we can remove those obstacles, so that everyone can bring her or his full self to the community. And that's kind of the overview of what we do.
Wow, so it sounds
That's
like
a mouthful.
Yeah, pretty substantial program with some very important goals and important work to do. And I certainly want to get back to some of the program goals and how you plan to achieve this work. But just as a little bit of background, how did you get into this work and how did you come to create this organization?
I have been interested in working with folks who are incarcerated for a very long time. So I would say over the last 30 years, I have done different kinds of things with people in prison, often in the shape of bringing programming, arts programming, humanities. A long time ago, teaching. I spent a year as a volunteer chaplain at the county jail back when it was in Westmoreland before it moved. I've done some volunteering with an organization called Alternatives to Violence Project, AVP. So I certainly have a sort of sense of calling and working with folks who are incarcerated. And I had a conversation with a woman a couple of years ago who herself had been incarcerated and had gotten out of jail, had been very successful in her own reentry, been able to attend Keene State, graduate, go on to do great things. And she and I had had a conversation about how difficult it is for women leaving the jail when there's not adequate support. And so we, just out of a conversation, we thought about, wow, what could we do to address that? And it got me thinking, and to be honest, I sort of thought, yeah, that's really important. I wonder who's going to do something about that. And then it's sort of like you look to your left, you look to your right, and you kind of go, or I went, well, I guess I should do something about it if I think that it's an issue. So I feel really fortunate that I just tried to have as many conversations with folks as I could and find people who were also interested. And we formed a very small little board, or a tiny little organization without a staff. We spent the first year really imagining having a residence. What would it be like to create kind of a transitional home? And what we realized was that's a wonderful idea. There's a definite need in the community, and as an organization, we have to scale up. So I learned a lot about organizations and organizational capacity. So we weren't quite ready to take that on. So what we did, there are about 5 of us on the board. So what we figured out is we asked the question, what can we do given our very limited resources of person power as well as a few dollars that will still have an impact? And we realized if we offered a mentoring program for women as they come out of jail, we wouldn't have the overhead of a building. And we could pretty much offer that without a huge amount of resources. So that's kind of how we evolved and why that particular work speaks to me. And I think the other people in the community and the people on our board are interested specifically around addressing, as I mentioned before, just the huge crisis around opioid and heroin and addiction, just because that's a huge reason that these folks are in jail. I mean, not exclusively, but most of the folks that we're working with, that would be a really crucial issue in their lives.
Sure. Wow. So this is an all-volunteer organization at this time?
Yes, with the exception of the one individual who is monetarily compensated, because we want to provide to really have a program with accountability. So what we do, I should just sort of say the mentoring program, how it works. Another board member and I go into the jail once a month and do an informational session, let the women know, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're offering. And if they're interested, they can fill out an application to be what we refer to as a mentee. And then they will pair up that woman first with a recovery coach who's been through a Recovery Coach Academy and had that particular training. And then all of our volunteers who work directly with the mentees also do about 8 hours of training with us. So first the women would, and in the case of someone who does not need a recovery coach because she doesn't have a substance use disorder, which is, we do have one person in that category, then she went right to what we call a community mentor. So the 2 parts are that the recovery coach has a skill set to particularly support people who are trying to get into recovery and sustain their recovery. And then the community mentor, we give some background training for some successful ways to work with folks and be supportive of folks. And that comes a little further down the road, so maybe 3-4 months later, after someone is, secured a safe place to live, hopefully has a good program of recovery and feels a little more settled in that. Then it's the community mentor is just there to help the woman plug into the community, feel more a part of it, learn how to access different things like all the different opportunities there are in this area, but that someone may not have ever been into the public library. Maybe she has, maybe she hasn't, or doesn't know that, gee, the library has some wonderful free passes for museums, so maybe she could do that with her kids, or just to have different experiences. So that's how the program works. So the one individual that we pay in order to provide support and supervision, so our mentors and our recovery coaches, we provide, without cost to them, professional supervision. And that's provided by a licensed, master's level licensed alcohol and drug counselor who's also a mental health clinician. And her name is Amy Ranelli, so a wonderful resource. She's also an adjunct faculty member at Antioch. So Amy, we compensate for her time supervising. But everybody else is a volunteer, so which is really lovely.
Wow, wow. And the community mentoring piece of that, I'm curious, are folks connected to human service agencies in the area that might provide, I'm thinking just because Monadnock United Way supports human service agencies like the River Center that offers employment, counseling support, and family support and those sorts of things. Are they connected to maybe some United Way partner agencies as well?
That's part of the reason that we're trying to partner with the Monadnock United Way, just to make some of those connections. So, for instance, I'm familiar with the River Center because I have a friend who works there, so it's a great organization. And so we are trying to do that so that our community mentors will be aware of the different resources in the area and can certainly point the mentees to different agencies who are already doing great work that we're not. So, So that's definitely a piece of what we're trying to do, is to network as broadly as we can. And I would certainly put in a plug to say, if anyone's listening, if any females are listening who are interested in being community mentors, certainly get in touch, and we welcome your application to do that. We're looking for community mentors all the time.
Great, and it's an important plug, and your contact information is being flashed on the screen throughout the show, so I do encourage the audience to take a look at that contact information and do get in touch with Leaf if you're interested in being a community mentor or otherwise are interested in getting more information about this program.
Right, and there are other ways to volunteer, so if people say, gee, I'm not interested in that, but I just love to be on the board, well, we'll welcome you in that way too, or other ways to volunteer and just be involved. Because another piece that we're looking for over time as we evolve is the next goal is to layer on what I call vocational mentorship. So I would say that a lot of the folks who we're trying to be supportive of may need supported employment. They may need an opportunity to gain employment experience, to gain some of the soft skills around employment, you know, how to work collaboratively, how to, you know, be responsible, how does it feel to be in a job where you actually are respected for your work. And not everybody's had the opportunity to do that. So, and it's not an easy job market, although we're in a state with relatively low unemployment. Certainly we're in an area with a lot of college students, and so some of the more entry-level jobs, you know, are not always so easy to get. And if someone has a criminal record, often people are hesitant. They say, well, gee, I can choose someone who doesn't have a criminal record, so why would I choose someone who does? So part of our outreach is to folks in the business community to say, well, here's why. You know, who in New England has ever lived in an old house and rehabbed it a little bit, you know, and said, gee, I need to put on a new porch, or I need to, you know, glaze my windows and put in some weather stripping, and it's a wonderful old house and it needs some love and attention. And I met actually a gentleman last year when I was speaking at a Rotary meeting in Nashua who happened to, that was his business. He said, I rehab old houses in Nashua. He said, I find the broken down houses that nobody would want. And he said, that's what I love, is to transform them into really beautiful, energy efficient homes and then resell them. And I thought, wow, people understand why you would do that with a house, but they don't always understand why would you do that with a person. And so that's really our mission, is to say, just in the same way, every house deserves to be as beautiful and functional as it can. Every human being deserves to be as beautiful and functional as she or he can. And that as a community, we can make that happen. So we're certainly looking to develop those kind of vocational mentorships where people would have an opportunity to gain skills and so be more productive. So that's a shout out there too. In case any of the gentlemen are listening and thinking, well, gee, if I can't be a personal mentor, that's fine. Maybe you own a business and would want to hire someone or offer a supported employment. So,
what an incredibly powerful metaphor, Leaf. I think that's really telling to what you do and the importance of what you do, for sure. So you'd spoken a little bit about the mentoring piece of it for incarcerated women, and then earlier you had also talked a bit about breaking down some of those obstacles, those barriers for people to become reintegrated and welcomed into society. Could you speak a little bit more about the work that you're doing to break down, or maybe the goal that you have for breaking down some of those obstacles? Sure.
So some of that work is a conversation like this on, you know, Cheshire TV. Part of it would be going to a Rotary Club. Part of it would be a TED Talk. It would be any opportunity to be, it can be one-to-one, it can be an audience, but just having conversations, again, so that people can rethink it differently. So just like I said, shifting the paradigm. The big obstacles for people obviously have to do with housing. So if I come out of jail and I manage to get on a waiting list for an apartment, say through Keene Housing, so perhaps subsidized family housing, I'm hoping to reunite with my children. Now, of course, there's a waiting list, but you know, there is a box that it does say, have you been convicted of a felony? And I think Keene Housing prefers to, it doesn't preclude one from having a chance to get housing, but often there's a time period like, gee, we'd like you to be 5 years out from your offense. Well, that's huge. Or if an individual landlord says again, oh, gee, I heard you just did 6 months in the county jail. I don't want you living here. Well, again, we all know without stable housing, there's that whole, you know, in the community around homelessness, people have figured out housing first. That it's almost impossible to become sober, to stay in recovery, to achieve recovery, if I don't have a safe roof over my head where I know it's stable, I'm not going to get kicked out. A big issue, especially for women, and this is a difference around women and men, women have often been living in situations before incarceration, often with a male partner, who may or may not have been abusive physically, who may or may not have been involved with drugs. Often women are the ones who are asked to hold these drugs while you hold them, and then she's caught with them, and it's enough of a quantity to be a felony conviction. So several of the women have said to us when we go in and do our info sessions, I'm worried where I'm going to live when I get out. Because right now my only option is to go back with my boyfriend, or, gee, my sister and her boyfriend, or my sister and her husband, or my best friend, but gee, they're all using drugs, and I don't want to do that anymore. And I need a safe place, and I don't have any money. So you can see that housing is huge. I would say that's right at the top of the list. Recovery services obviously are a big piece. Mental health treatment is a huge issue. Lots of folks have co-occurring, substance abuse issues, but also other mental health issues. And part of what's challenging, again, about women in particular, more so than men, most incarcerated women have a history of trauma and abuse in their background, which has often been untreated or not sufficiently cared for. And so people are coming out with that kind of emotional woundedness, and they need that care. And again, when any of us are fragile and we're faced with just everyday decisions, I'm trying to get a place to live, gee, I don't have a car, so I have to figure out transportation, and it's a little icy out there, and you can see that any of us on our best day, if we're super strong, we might cope with it. But if we're just struggling, and it's like the broken shoelaces, it's usually not the big things. So if somebody, if she's depending on a ride to get to her appointment at Monadnock Family Services for some counseling, and then the ride doesn't come, and then she might panic, and it sort of snowballs on you. So in terms of having conversations with people about just trying to have some consciousness about what is it like if all your nerves are raw, if you don't have resources. So if you need to get to work and your child care provider suddenly calls in sick, maybe you've got a friend or neighbor who can watch your child. But if you don't have that, or you're on a track phone and you don't have any minutes left, some of it is just the conscious. Again, I think people want to be supportive. So it isn't ever that people are going, I don't care about those people. It's just if in our own lives we haven't had to think about certain obstacles, part of it is just being helpful, trying to be helpful with people and say, let me kind of paint a picture so that you can understand a little bit better how the smallest acts of kindness and support can be super helpful. So housing, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, employment, are all, and then just a sense of welcoming. And I would say thinking about the language we use. So I'm a big proponent of not using nouns as descriptors. So I don't think that people are addicts. I think that people have a brain disease, which some of us call addiction and some of us call substance use disorder. And that's a condition that a person has, kind of like having blue eyes or brown eyes. But usually we don't go, hey, brown eye, come over here.
Right.
And I think the same too with people's, people have a felony record or criminal justice involvement. Yes, that's a fact about them, but hopefully that doesn't define it. So even something as simple as how we refer to folks can be enormously welcoming or unwelcoming.
Yeah, Monadnock Restorative Communities, we're so fortunate to have this organization playing this really important role, not only supporting women in incarceration, getting out of incarceration, but also connecting them to these really important resources and supporting them to say, that not just you or your volunteer colleagues, but the community is here for you. And really, it sounds like you're reframing the conversation that the community is having amongst itself about people getting out of incarceration.
Right, and that's really where our name came from.
Yeah.
So the reason we're called Monadnock Restorative Community is we're trying to restore the Monadnock community, so our region, we're trying to restore this community to wholeness, because we can't be whole as a community unless everybody's here. And as long as we think there are all these people who are missing, so the people who are in the county jail, they're still in our community. We just lock them up so we can't see them, but they're there. In the same way that folks who are homeless are in our community, we might not see them, and people who are struggling with substance use disorder are in our community. And so the idea is, we're restoring the community to wholeness, one person at a time. That's where the name comes from. So in case people are wondering, well, what's that about?
Boy, it gave me chills.
Oh, good. That's a good thing. So.
And in case the audience is wondering, the website for Monadnock Restorative Community is monadnockrestorative.org. monadnock.org.
That's it.
Yes. So pretty simple and easy to remember. I checked out the website this morning. There's a lot of great information in there about your different phases of your programming, right. And then also a great TED Talk that you delivered last year. So I encourage folks to visit the site. Yep. I would love to hear, do you have any successes to speak of at this time in the year and a half that you've been around?
Well, we just started our mentoring program this fall. Mm-hmm. So I feel really great that we went to the jail for the first time in September, and we've gone in October, November, and we already have 7 mentees, which is great. And just comparatively, there's a wonderful program in Vermont that the Department of Corrections overseas, and then they have a nonprofit who administers their mentoring program, and they've been going for about 15 years. And I called the director of their program a couple of months ago, and she said, "Wow, you already have 7 mentees. My gosh, it took us 8 or 9 months to get 4."
Wow.
So kudos. So I feel like successful in that we already have this program, and the drug court has already reached out to us to talk about partnering with us so that maybe we could provide mentoring for some of the women who are going through the drug court in hopes that they won't ever have to go to jail. So that feels like a success. And the other wonderful thing I would love to shout out to the 100+ women in Keene. A new chapter for the 100+ women who care just started in Keene last week. They had their first meeting, and I'm just so grateful that they voted to support us. So 125 awesome female human beings wrote checks to Monadnock Restorative Community. So that feels like a tremendous success. And I think certainly we've gotten some feedback from some of the mentees who obviously appreciate the fact that they feel so supported and cared about. And also from our recovery coaches have thanked us for providing the support of really wonderful professional supervision. Because again, in Vermont, great program that it is, they have a once a month, their mentees meet monthly and have kind of just a sort of peer support group, but they're not getting some professional supervision. So I feel like we have, for a very small program, we have a lot of successes in a very short amount of time. And really what we did in that first year was really figure out what can we do given the size we are. So certainly I would say, part of it was just the growing pains of being a brand new organization. And how do you start one? I have to admit, I've been learning as I go, reading books about nonprofit, community benefit organizations, because that's, my background isn't in how to do that. But I would encourage anyone else. I mean, I think it's really important, especially in the world that we're living in, to say, we're not responsible for fixing everything, but we are responsible for doing what we can where we are. And I just appreciate, this is an area with so many lovely people who care so, as you know, so much about so many different people and causes. So I feel like it's a great place to try to make a difference.
Sure. Well, Leif, it sounds like you have a lot to celebrate, all the successes so far, and with your continued collaboration and outreach with all the different human service agencies and justice organizations out there, and not to mention with outreach to all the wonderful volunteers in our community. I think there's going to be more and more to celebrate. This program is so valuable to our community, so thank you, and thanks to your volunteer coworkers that really make a difference. Anything else you'd like to share with our audience tonight before we close? I think just a thank you to the community for being such a wonderful, caring community, and please join us in any way that folks feel moved to do it. We're delighted to have everybody participate who can. Great. Well, thank you for that invitation, and I hope you get some calls as a result of this program. Great. Thanks, Nikki. Great. Thank you. And audience, thank you for being with us tonight. Again, our guest was Leif Seligman from Monadnock Restorative Community. Certainly check out her website to learn more, but hope you tune in next week. And just a reminder to give, to advocate, to volunteer, and live united. Thanks.